This is a fragment from the biography of a versatile rogue, a man whose adventurous career leaps at a bound from Chicago to Cape Town, and whose criminal history is a part of the police archives in New York, Chicago, London, Paris, Vienna, and Berlin. Beginning as a prototype of the artful dodger, he has gone from pocket-picking to bunco steering, and then run the entire gamut of crime, stopping only providentially, perhaps, at murder. Frank Macy, the doubtful hero of this queer story, was born in Freeport, Illinois. There are many old residents in that place who still recall him as a precocious baby, a smart boy, and a clever youth. Freeport soon proved to be too small to satisfy his bulging genius. But even before he left his birthplace, he made little excursions from the paths of virtue which in the boy are so often prophetic of the man's career. When he reached man's estate, he was tall and straight as an Indian. He had coal-black hair and a sallow complexion which lighted up brightly whenever he was in a humor to be affable with his fellow man. It was in Chicago that Frank Macy first distinguished himself in crime. A little more than a dozen years ago, an advertisement appeared in the Chicago papers stating that a wealthy widow, about to take a long trip abroad, was willing to sell her favorite horse, Dobbin. After the money had been paid and within 24 hours, Dobbin began to undergo a most curious transformation. What had been a magnificent specimen of horseflesh began to show strange signs of decrepitude. He shriveled up, as it were. It seems almost impossible to properly describe this marvelous transformation in mere words. The scene now shifts from Chicago to Lowe's Exchange in Trafalgar Square, London. John Wilkie at that time was a London correspondent of an American paper. And while standing in the corridor of this hostelry, he was surprised to see his old-time gyp friend Frank Macy enter and place his name on the hotel register. Macy looked prosperous. He was dressed in swagger style, wore a long coat, carried a heavy cane, and had a sunburst of diamonds reposing amidst the folds of a blood-red cravat. In fact, he looked too vulgarly rich to be true. Wilkie consulted the hotel register and found that his erstwhile criminal friend had registered as Frank Lacey. The change of attire and the assumed name were suspicious, and the American lost no time in going to the telephone and calling up Frank Froest, one of the brightest detectives in Scotland Yard. Wilkie told Froest that it might be worth his while to come up to Lowe's and have a look at the latest addition to the American invasion of London. Not long after the meeting in Lowe's Exchange, all London became excited over what was called the Cutlass Mystery. It began when a well-dressed elderly gentleman of considerable wealth was found on a sidewalk with his head badly cut and the blood flowing from several saber wounds. He said he had no recollection of how he came to be in such a plight, and resolutely declined to give the police any information upon the subject. 2 days later, another man was found similarly wounded and in the same condition. He was not as close-mouthed as the first individual, and went so far as to say that his misfortune was the result of a card party in which he had participated the previous night. He was unable, however, to give the locality of the house, having been taken there by an obliging cabby whom he had sought with a request to be conveyed to some place where he could satisfy his desires to dally with the goddess of chance. In less than 24 hours, another man was found with 2 saber cuts about his head. And then the Cutlass Mystery became the reigning sensation of London. The next chapter in the history of this curious rogue occurred at the little watering place of Margate. A musical instrument dealer of London was taking his holiday at this resort and was enjoying himself in a manner such as is possible only to a London tradesman. As he was strolling along the Strand, he came face to face with Lacey, who was then a fugitive from justice. He grasped him by the coat. "Mr. Lacey," he exclaimed, "I am so glad to see you." "Why?" asked Lacey. "Why?" retorted the other. "Because now you will pay me for the mandolin you bought from me about a month ago." Lacey laughed. "You will pay me now, won't you?" cried the dealer hysterically. "You wouldn't rob a poor man, would you?" "Fade away," said the versatile rogue. "I'm having my holiday now and I can't be disturbed by vulgar tradesmen." Lacey immediately realized the mistake he had made, and learning the character of the telegram that had been sent to Scotland Yard, made quick preparations for shortening his vacation at the cozy seashore resort. He acted with characteristic disregard of conventionalities. He summoned a fisherman and hired him to take him out in a small boat, and hailed a castle liner, which was bound for South Africa. By the aid of a clever cock and bull story, he induced the captain to take him aboard, and before the Scotland Yard man reached Margate, Lacey was calmly sailing the sea on his way to Cape Town. Superintendent Froest immediately telegraphed to the authorities at Cape Town describing Lacey and instructing them to apprehend the man on his arrival at that port. Lacey managed to get ashore and strolled about the African city, admiring the botanic gardens and the astronomical observatory with the enthusiasm of a tourist. He was inspecting the fine new docks of the place when the agent of Scotland Yard clapped his hands on his shoulder and placed him under arrest. Lacey submitted with perfect good grace and was formally lodged in jail at Cape Town. Arrangements were made to have him returned to England the following day. But alas, his satisfaction was premature, for the daring Lacey jumped off the train while it was in motion and disappeared in the depths of a South African forest. The officer of the train stopped at the next station and with the assistance of several other men made a search of the woods. They finally located their man in an empty house a few miles from the point where he had jumped from the train. He was arrested for keeps this time, taken back to London, tried, sentenced, and imprisoned. After he had served his time, he started on a tour of the continent, accompanied by a mysterious blonde woman who passed as his wife. He played cards, engaged in the pastime of bunco steering, and varied these performances occasionally by assuming the part of the wronged husband. He had a scheme by which the bank could be broken, and offered to show the man how he could take $1,000 and come out with a profit of $10,000. The man accepted this glowing offer, but instead of going to the house that was designated, he notified the district police, and the versatile rogue was once more arrested, this time under the name of Frank Tracy. He was released on bail, however, and soon after again sought the historic atmosphere of London. Superintendent Froest, who was always on the lookout for queer characters, learned that Tracy, as he now called himself, was in London 24 hours after he had set his feet on English soil. He instructed his subordinates to be on the lookout for Tracy, but otherwise did not give much thought to the man. One morning the telephone bell at Scotland Yard rang, and the voice of an excited individual who proved to be a clerk in a banking house near Leadenhall Street informed the authorities that a thief had entered the institution that morning and robbed one of its depositors of £200. There was much excitement. A crowd had gathered in the corridors, and in the confusion the thief had escaped with the money. "Pardon me," said the stranger, "but you have dropped one of your notes." The depositor glanced at the floor on the other side of the desk, and sure enough there was a banknote. "Thank you," he replied gratefully, and stooped down to pick up the odd note. The act only consumed 2 or 3 seconds, but when the depositor straightened up and was about to add the missing note to his pile, he found to his amazement that the original package of money had gone, and with it the stranger. He gave the alarm and rushed out of the bank, but when he reached the street, the crowd was so great that it was impossible to find his man. When Superintendent Froest received the news of the theft, he immediately dispatched one of his men to the bank, but not satisfied with this, he resolved to go there in person as soon as he had finished the work in his private office at Scotland Yard. That only consumed a few minutes, and at its completion Mr. Froest pulled down the top of his roll desk and hurried towards Leadenhall Street. At Aldgate, where Cornhill and Leadenhall Street converge, he saw a tall, well-dressed man hurrying along amidst the crowd. It did not take him many seconds to recognize the man as his old friend, the versatile rogue, who had lived successively under the titles of Frank Macy, Frank Lacey, and Frank Tracy. Instinctively, the superintendent associated the fellow with the theft from the bank in Leadenhall Street. He walked up and took Tracy by the arm. "My dear friend," he said, "I would like you to go downtown to the office with me and have a talk over old times." Tracy made no resistances. Indeed, this was characteristic of the man. The moment an officer of the law touched him, he surrendered without a struggle. The 2 men proceeded to Scotland Yard, and Tracy, when searched, was found to possess the £200 which had been stolen from the depositor in the bank that morning. He was tried for that offence, convicted, and served his time. The versatile rogue is at liberty once again, and for the time being is honoring the United States with his presence. This brief sketch is not offered as a story of his life, It is only what it purports to be, a fragment from the life of a versatile rogue.